And we could be doing the same thing with oscillator 2. Let's listen to oscillator 2's functions before we start doing that. Oscillator 2 also has a triangle modulation and a square modulation. But unlike modulation source VCO1, modulation source VCO2 goes to envelope 2 instead of envelope 1. So then you can have each oscillator affected by a different envelope. So you could create different transients for each of them. And this, we really should have VCA set to gate. And what we're really getting at here is we're going to find out that this synthesizer is ideally suited to drum sounds because manipulation of the frequency of an oscillator deeply helps in the creation of drum sounds. So there's going to be a video about creating drum sounds with this. And you can see right away that having the ability to direct individual envelopes to individual oscillators could create some really valid drum sounds, and also having a VCA that you could set to gate so that those envelopes are free just to control the frequencies of the oscillators. So it's super powerful in that way. The other thing that oscillator 2 has in its modulation is that a MIDI signal can be used to modulate VCO2. So you have some sort of external MIDI signal as a modulation source, which is very powerful. Okay, so those are the oscillators. If we go down to the filter, this is our filter modulation. Okay, as you can see, I have set the filter modulation to the LFO triangle. It's also being modulated here. Let's turn the envelope off. Now you can hear it more clearly. It's pretty straightforward, and the same with the square. In this instance, remember that it's not the pitch of the sound that's being modulated, it's just the filter cutoff point. Next, though, we have a square wave from VCO1. So we have the ability to modulate the filter with an audio range modulator or an oscillator. And this is what gave, for example, one of the ways that you make a mini Moog sound as rich as a mini Moog sounds. Because that modulation, you're shaking the filter cutoff point back and forth to such a massively quick degree, it's creating a sort of saturated effect. But then if you start to like modulate the pitch of VCO1 with VCO2, you start to get some sort of amplitude modulation sounds. which adds some incredible harmonic richness to a sound. So you're no longer filtering as much as you are actually creating new timbre. So it's here in the modulation that we get into the fact that, okay, we've stepped off now into a much more a higher level analog synthesizer with higher level functionality. What I've just done is now I'm using an envelope to control the filter cutoff frequency. And since that's already being affected by an audio range oscillator, which is also being affected in the audio range by another audio range oscillator, you're going to get these weird ring mod amplitude modulation sounds like this. And that's with the oscillators off. That's just filter self-oscillation. And now I am using the second envelope to modulate the frequency of oscillator 2. Oscillator 2 is being used with that modulation to modulate oscillator 1. Oscillator 1 with the two different sorts of modulation that are occurring now is modulating the filter cutoff point along with the second envelope. Now I am starting to mess with the pulse width modulation, the glide, and we can even mess with tuning. So we have stepped off the simple analog synthesizer and moved into the realm of extremely experimental modulation that can be used in a variety of ways, but I'm going to show you especially how such things really lend themselves to making drum sounds. However, this is not a drum sound, but it's a very cool space sound. Remember that sound we started out with? We've come a long way. And that just gives you, that scratches the surface of the different ways that you can use these different parts of the synthesizer to modulate each other. It's the sort of functionality that we kind of saw on the ARP 2600. There's kind of some parallels between this and the ARP 2600 in the way that you can use an oscillator to modulate an oscillator, and that second oscillator you can use to modulate the first oscillator. So when you have two oscillators modulating each other, that's some serious cross modulation there. And it creates really bizarre outcomes, especially when you start changing pitch and start changing filter cutoff, as you can plainly see. So that is our modulation section.